Chapter 1, Present Day. The apartment was silent save for the low, rhythmic hum of the air conditioner and the faint, almost imperceptible clinking of cutlery from the kitchen. It was the kind of quiet that pressed in on River, heavy and suffocating, amplifying the emptiness that had become the constant companion of his life. He sat on the worn leather couch in the living room, his gaze fixed on the muted television, though the words and images on the screen failed to register, merely flickered past like irrelevant shadows. His thoughts were elsewhere, trapped in a grim limbo where every day felt like a dreary rehearsal for a life he never wanted, a performance he was increasingly incapable of sustaining. Lakin moved through the space with a practiced indifference, each step measured, each glance calculated. Her presence was a cool, distant satellite in his orbit. The marriage they shared, now nearly 2 years old, was nothing more than a contract, a cold arrangement built on necessity, not love. It was a silent agreement forged in the desperate need for a green card, a legal formality that had become a gilded cage. River's eyes, heavy with unspoken weariness, followed her as she poured herself a glass of wine, her movements smooth but distant, almost ethereal. They had been living together for nearly 2 years now, sharing this apartment that never truly felt like home. But the warmth of a real partnership had long since evaporated, replaced by a chilling detachment. When they married, it was a quiet understanding, a pragmatic exchange. He was the key that would unlock her future here in the States, allowing her to stay beyond her visa's expiration. She, in turn, would offer him companionship, or at least that was the carefully articulated plan. Lakin had been a bartender at the grungy, low-lit pub where River used to escape the pressures of his failing medical studies and the lingering shadows of his past. He had been reeling from the wreck, from his slide into substance abuse, from the constant fear of his biological parents resurfacing, and the profound ache of loneliness after his adopted parents' health had begun to decline. Lakin, with her sharp wit and seemingly no-nonsense attitude, had appeared to offer a simple transactional escape from his chaotic inner world. But things changed, drastically, now that River was back on track, finally approved to return to medical school, and on the precipice of achieving his adoptive father's dream of a respectable career. His status had shifted, and Lakin, ever ambitious, wanted more. She wanted romance, or at least the convincing appearance of it. She wanted him to be the successful, attentive husband who could elevate her life to the glittering social standards she craved. But River felt nothing, no flicker of desire, no spark of hope. He barely tolerated her presence, the silence between them thick and impenetrable, heavy with unacknowledged resentments. Their interactions were sparse, limited to the bare minimum required to maintain appearances when Lakin's friends were around, or when she demanded some semblance of their relationship. He answered her questions with clipped responses, his voice often flat, devoid of emotion. She in turn offered him nothing but cold smiles and sharp, assessing looks that made his skin crawl. Sometimes, late at night, when the hum of the air conditioner was the only sound and Lakin was breathing softly on her side of the bed, always on her side, the physical distance a metaphor for their emotional chasm, he wondered if she felt the same emptiness gnawing at him, or if she was simply a brilliant actress, playing a part in this unscripted tragedy for her own gain. He glanced down at his hands that were now scarred from his past, yet steady, capable, honed by long hours studying anatomy and the intricate dexterity required for his burgeoning music, and he wondered how he had ended up here, locked in a marriage where the only thing exchanged was convenience, a life that felt like a prison he had willingly built for himself. The mornings came and went without ceremony, each a colorless copy of the last. Lakin would brush past River on her way out to work, slipping into a tailored power suit that seemed designed more to intimidate than impress, its sharp lines mirroring her ambition. She would glance over her shoulder, eyes sharp and expectant, as if waiting for some sign that River was paying attention, that he cared, that he was playing his part in her meticulously crafted life. But River didn't care. Not really, not about Lakin, not the facade. His thoughts always drifted back to Berlin, to a bathroom, to a quiet room, to Kate. He watched her from the kitchen doorway as she applied lipstick with careful precision, a bold, striking red that seemed to scream defiance. She orchestrated this simple act, just as she orchestrated every moment of their lives together. She wasn't satisfied with just existing side by side anymore. No, she wanted romance, or something that looked enough like it to deceive her friends, to validate her status. Last night she had pressed herself against him in the dim light of their bedroom, her whispers for more affection, more attention, more something. a desperate plea for validation he couldn't provide. But River had recoiled, shrugging her off like a bad memory, a suffocating blanket he needed to escape. Her frustration was a living thing, a growing chasm between them that widened with every cold glance and clipped word. He could see it in her eyes, the mix of anger and disappointment that she meticulously hid behind forced smiles when they were in public, especially when Lakin's friends were present. They were a predatory pack, Lakin's closest circle. Ireland, in particular, always managed to deliver a subtle dig, a patronizing comment about his long hours or his artistic hobbies, making it clear she thought he wasn't good enough for their queen bee. And he hated it. Hated what their marriage had become. Hated being paraded as a trophy husband when he felt like a hollow shell. This wasn't the life he had dreamed of, not the life he wanted when he left Germany, when he fought tooth and nail to make something of himself, to overcome the scars of his past. He remembered the feeling of freedom, however fleeting, he'd experienced with Kate. But here he was, trapped in a gilded cage with a woman who wanted to rewrite the story on her terms, to extract more from him than he had ever agreed to give. River caught himself wondering if she ever cared about him at all, even fleetingly, or if he was just a stepping stone in her relentless quest for status and comfort, a means to an end. The divide between them wasn't just emotional, it was physical too. Nights spent on opposite sides of the bed, the mattress a vast, cold expanse between them. Days filled with silence, punctuated only by the ringing phone or the distant hum of city life beyond their windows. His adoptive parents, still living quietly in the countryside, seemed a world away. A comforting thought he clutched close, knowing the day they would no longer be there was rapidly approaching, leaving him truly alone. He wanted to reach out to bridge the gap, to find some semblance of peace, but the words caught in his throat. Because what could he say? That he felt nothing for her? That this marriage was a mistake from the start, born out of desperation and legal necessity? That the woman he truly couldn't let go of, the one who haunted his every thought, was Kate? Instead, he buried himself deeper in his work. Long hours at the hospital where he was only an intern, still proving himself late. Nights in the lab, and secret moments playing his music in his dimly lit home studio, where the only person he needed to impress was himself. It was in these hidden spaces that he truly lived. Lakin's presence was a constant weight, a silent, suffocating reminder of everything that was wrong and missing in his life. He often found himself thinking of Kate while treating patients, a fleeting image of her smile flashing through his mind, a sharp contrast to the cold reality he inhabited. He sighed, leaning against the kitchen counter, the cold surface grounding him in the unwelcome present. This wasn't love. It was a contract slowly suffocating any trace of hope he might have held on to. This was not the life he had wanted, not the marriage he'd imagined. His mind drifted back to Kate, the woman who had meant something real, and a pang of guilt mixed with longing stabbed through him. The late afternoon sun filtered through the half-open blinds, casting long, sharp shadows across the sleek, impersonal kitchen countertops. River stood at the island, absently peeling an orange, the sticky sweetness of the fruit doing little to cut through the bitter tension that permeated the room. Lakin's expensive perfume, cloying and omnipresent, quickly overwhelmed the scent of citrus. Lakin sat at the small dining table, her posture rigid, her legs crossed tightly beneath her, fingers tapping a slow, deliberate rhythm on the polished wood. Her eyes were fixed on him, calculating, expectant, cold as ice. The silence between them was thick, more suffocating than any argument, pregnant with unspoken demands. So, she said, her voice cool but with an edge that made River's skin crawl, the casual tone a thinly veiled accusation. When are you going to start acting like you want to be here, River? River didn't look up. He continued peeling the orange slowly, deliberately, each segment separated with painstaking care, as if dragging out the task might stretch time into something less hostile. He needed a moment to compose himself, to build the emotional wall he needed to face her. I'm here, he said flatly, his voice devoid of inflection. Aren't I? Lakin let out a short, humorless laugh, a brittle sound that grated on his nerves. Physically, yes, you graced us with your presence. But emotionally, you may be in another country, or another dimension, given how much you seem to avoid me. River finally glanced at her, his blue eyes tired, shadowed by sleepless nights and unaddressed anxieties, but steady. You married me to stay here, Lakin. I never signed up for this. His voice was low but hard, a rare flash of his suppressed anger. Her eyes flashed, a cold fire igniting in their depths. Don't pretend like you don't know what this was from the beginning, River. You needed me, and I needed you. It was a mutually beneficial arrangement. But now that you have your fancy medical degree practically in hand, suddenly you think you can check out? You think you can just stop playing your part? River's jaw clenched, muscle twitching beneath his skin. It's not like that, he said, the lie landing heavy on his tongue, because in some ways it was just that. Then why do you keep pushing me away? Lakin demanded. She leaned forward, her hands braced against the edge of the table, knuckles white. You don't even try anymore. You come home after I'm asleep. You walk like I'm furniture, like I'm invisible. I have my work, he murmured, rubbing the back of his neck. The excuse felt brittle, a worn-out shield he barely believed anymore. Being an intern doesn't exactly come with free time. Her expression hardened, a storm darkening behind her eyes. You always have an excuse, River. Always. There's always something. Work, music, exhaustion. And I hear Ireland complaining that you never want to go out with her or your colleagues. You're always hiding away in that little room like your life outside of it doesn't exist. The mention of Ireland hit a nerve, as it always did, sharp and exacting. Lakin said it casually, but River heard the subtext, heard the judgment.